Oh boy, you guys have been struggling with defending post-patch in FIFA 22. The amount of comments asking for an updated defending tutorial are ridiculous. Well lads, of course I'm about to drop it for you guys. This is how to defend post-patch in FIFA 22.
Three men around him to somehow find some space. Ronaldo, fantastic, opening the drive back.
He's made himself the tiniest bit of space.
Almost feels like a bit of a taunt. Didn't really go for him. Oh! It's a display there. Absolutely ridiculous. The Elastico on the goal line. On the goal line, the finest.
We
of
talked about
margins.
AUSSIEFIFA. He's not here to make up the numbers.
Now this will not delve into the basics of defending. If you want, basics of defending in FIFA 22, there's plenty of tutorials on the channel, lads. There's also a complete guide to defending in general on FIFA 22 on the channel. So go and check that out. But today is more deconstructing what EA have changed in the live tuning update in terms of the width of the defense, as well as how the midfielders are not dropping back as deep. I'm going to show you guys the new way of defending, or at least ways that you can prevent leaving too many gaps open, or at least preventing your players from being too far apart and leaving too much space and gaps in the defense. Dragging midfielders back and ensuring that everyone is covered before pouncing on the opponent. People, from the start, of course, if you watch my defending tutorials, I am a big fan of manual defending and basically pressing the opponent. We can still do that, but we need to ensure with the patch and how EA have said they now have made midfielders push further up the field and not be as close to the actual defensive line, that now we need to ensure that the midfielders are basically covering the space and the passing lines before we press the opponent, before we put too much pressure on the opponent, drag defenders out and drag midfielders out of their position. So what I recommend you guys doing is ensuring that you're running your midfielders back, covering those defensive positions, making sure that they are in those CDM positions when you have your CDMs or your CMs, and covering that space that is in between the midfield and the defensive line. If you're just going to rely on the AI to do it, it will be too far apart. As you guys know, they've tweaked it. They've made the more space between the defensive line and the midfield. So we need to counter this by dragging the midfielders back, placing them in their positions, and then once the space is covered and once the passing options are covered, then pouncing on the opponent to make that tackle. Delving off into that though, when you are dragging midfielders back, you need to ensure that the attackers do not have that much time on the ball if they receive the ball. And what I mean by that is, if you're dragging the midfielder back to cover the space, as I was saying, and your opponent manages to find a ball into the attacker, you need to not just rely on you running back midfielders. Like I said in the first segment, you need to select the defender automatically, instantaneously with the right stick, to ensure that you can face up to him, and I always use the analogy, place a plastic bag over his head and ensure he does not breathe. You want to suffocate him. You want to make sure he doesn't turn, and this is very, very important when defending post-patch in FIFA 22. You need to ensure the opponent does not have time to move, and if you're just relying on the midfielders to run back, then you will be vulnerable, lads, because you'll have time to turn and shoot. You need to select off the midfielder to the defender and face up to him. So this is basically a segment on what you should do if your opponent manages to find the ball into the attacker. You should select the defenders, lads. Delving into yet again the midfielders, and in terms of trying to prevent the midfield from having too much space and too much gap, is basically you need to continuously switch between the two midfielders that you have control of. You need to continuously select the CDMs together to position them back. Okay, otherwise they're going to drift too far apart, as this patch has been implemented with the width of the midfield, the actual space between the defensive line and the midfielders, and in general the width between the centre backs. You need to continuously select between the two midfielders when you're dragging them back. You can't just rely on the AI, as I said. You need to continuously select them with the right stick, drag them back, and then, as I said, once everyone's covered, once the space has been covered and they're in a good position, to then pounce on the player with the ball to get the ball off them. You can no longer rely on the AI to defend for you in the bots. You can no longer, lads, and this is because there is more space in the bots, more gaps for your opponent to exploit, you need to select the defenders to face up to the attackers. They cannot breathe. They cannot move. If they turn, they will get a shot off. And because there's more space between the defenders, there is a less likely chance that you will get that block off. So as I said, it's similar to the, I think, third segment. When they find the ball into the attackers in the box, you need to select the defenders. You cannot automatically use the AI to do so, lad. And this has always been the same pretty much. People are complaining they can't defend, they can't do this, can't do that. If you've been looking at my defending tutorials throughout this whole year, and you've been looking at the way I personally defend, how I've taught you, manual defending is the way to go. It's always going to get you by, not only in FIFA 22, but in every single year of FIFA, lads. I can't stress to you guys enough. That is why I always stress to you, right stick switching is very important. You need to not rely on the AI so much. You can use second man press, but not always. You need to use it, in times where it's necessary. You can't just rely on the computer to do it for you, because it is not sufficient enough at a high level of play. Yes, Division 8, Division 7, Division 6, 5 even, you can AI defend. You get it up to the Division 4s, Division 3s, 2s, 1s and elites, lads, you're not going to be able to defend properly. So it's important that we're manually defending, and if they get the ball into the bots, we need to right stick switch to the defenders to face up to them, and we need to ensure we're not leaving too much space in between the defenders. The way we do that is manual defending, because if you leave the AI do their thing with this patch, with this live tuning, you will leave too much space in the bots for your opponent to exploit. And this is the trouble people are having. The comments are coming out, there's too much space in the bots. I can't seem to get my defenders to defend because there's too much space, lads. They're too far apart. The way you do this, the way you prevent this, is by ensuring you're manually defending with the right stick. Super important, lads. Be sure to do it. That will signal the end of this short but sweet tutorial on how to defend post-patch in FIFA 22. I've taken everything into consideration in terms of the live tuning notes, and then I've shown you guys how you can defend with these packs. Very important that we are mostly manual defending. The only AI defending we're wanting to do is basically by dragging the defenders back into that space between the defensive line and the midfield. Super important, and you guys should do it. That will signal the end of it. Doing tutorials on Instagram and TikTok. I'm also coaching 101 on patreon.com. Links are all in the description, lads, down below. But as always, hope you have a good day. I'm out. Sayonara, au revoir, adios, salam, ciao. Goodbye.